Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DMSC conference, which normally does take place in Napa. Unfortunately, with all the craziness going on right now, that was unable to be done this year. Unfortunately, hopefully next year we'll be right back out in lovely Napa Valley. Brian always puts on a great event there. It was a lot of fun, especially with all the wine going around. Everyone has a good time. But the good news is Brian was able to still put together an excellent conference virtually that it features a lot of really great speakers on everything new coming down the line in automotive, all things digital, all things websites, digital retailing, and advertising, like we're going to talk about here today. So in this workshop, we are going to be discussing everything you need to know about video advertising with OTT or over-the-top video content, and specifically Amazon and their Fire TV system. There's a lot of value to you guys at the dealership level incorporating an OTT marketing strategy into your current digital advertising strategy to help not only enhance the advertising you're doing today, but to help you drive or push more people into the car buying market within your area, so that ultimately you can control your entire sales funnel from top down using OTT as a very solid starting point to get users interested in your products, and then connect it to all of your other digital advertising to help pull customers through the funnel into your showroom. So with that, we're going to jump right into it today. My name is Gino Cipperoni. I'm the Chief Sales Officer with Dealer eProcess. I've been in the automotive industry almost 10 years now, exclusively with Dealer eProcess. Excuse me. I actually started off my career here as a paid search strategist. So my sort of starting point here has always been in the realm of digital marketing. It's really what's been kind of my main interest in everything that I've done here. And I'm really excited to bring along with us here Tim Bowles. Tim, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here, thrilled to be part of DMSC. I am functioning as Director of Video Strategy for DEP. I've been in this business now, the advertising game, for 35 years, specializing in automotive. I've worked by managing the Tier 3 teams at Univision. I've been a part of the Comcast and the Charter cable companies' auto teams. I've worked in a startup. I helped start up a company that was a third-party lead generation program for Walmart and also for Univision. So I've worked in Polk data extensively. I was the key account manager for Nissan of the Americas. I've owned an ad agency specializing in auto, and I've sold print, radio, TV, and digital with the automotive business over the years. So I'm thrilled to be here, happy to be working with our friends here at the conference, and I am hoping that we can bring you some great insights that will mean meaningful traffic that will close sales for your dealerships.
Awesome. So Tim, it's safe to say you've kind of done it all as far as automotive.
I've been in the store once or twice.
No, well, your experience is invaluable, particularly when it comes to the OTT space. And that's what we're going to be talking about here today. So just to give everyone a very concise agenda of what we want to look at today, we're going to talk about what is OTT. OTT is one of those newer acronyms that's been floating around the industry for a little bit while. I think it's important to define what OTT is, so that if you do go down the road of engaging in an OTT advertising strategy, you know what you should be looking for. And then OTT advertising itself, very, very different from your traditional broadcast advertising. So we're going to point some things out to you today that you need to be aware of when it comes to constructing an OTT strategy. And then how to measure success. I think in my mind, or at least what gets me the most excited about OTT advertising, is that unlike traditional linear or broadcast video advertising, there's mountains of data that can be used to measure and optimize the effectiveness of these OTT campaigns. So this is what we're going to get into today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim. And Tim, tell us why OTT advertising is considered the third revolution of TV.
Sure. Well, back in 1939, and this was fun for us to build because having worked in traditional and digital, it was like, wow, I can remember some of these things, and obviously some of these things I can't. But in 1939, the World's Fair introduced television, and it was very, very small and a great big wood cabinet. But within 10 years, 2/3 of the homes in the United States had a TV. Of course, that was post-World War II. And right after that, the golden age of TV, they call it, in the 50s. And you think about all the wonderful shows that were on back then, from the Honeymooners and a lot of the vaudeville acts that had come up through radio were now on television. And it was a lot of variety shows. Anyway, that saw the era of color TV, another step forward in technology for television, along with the growth of network programming. So that was kind of our era of the 50s, which was the first revolution. And the second revolution was really marked by cable and satellite TV. And if you think about it, cable was the dawn of more choice beyond the big three or the big four, which we came to know later when Fox was born in the late 80s, early 90s. But in the 60s and 70s and 80s, it was cable that brought choice beyond the big three networks. Satellite brought another choice of how to consume the same content that you got on cable, and it gave the homes that were beyond the cable pipe or the cable fiber, the cable line, an opportunity. So if you lived in a rural setting or you were just wherever the cable stopped, you were a mile down the road, you could use satellite to get that same content. And that was really where the early 90s saw a big advent. So that's our second revolution. Now with the third revolution, really starts in the 2000s. It was a whole lot because we, and the folks in the cable business, had laid big fiber optic lines, and they called it the pipe. And we were able to push more data through it. So you saw more internet being hooked up through cable because it was a bigger broadband of data could be flowed through it. So we started seeing over the top and high definition being born. Of course, Netflix went from being a DVD company that mailed them to you to being a streaming service. And that was really the O's that was starting there. And then in 2010, you started seeing what they called skinny bundles and video everywhere being packaged where people could enjoy high definition TV. They could enjoy these streaming services because, again, the pipe could handle it. And they had choice. So they could choose cable, satellite, perhaps antenna, or within the internet, they could skip all that and go straight to consuming those wonderful pieces of content that they like to enjoy, their favorite programs, or they could add. So we'll get into a bit of that in a minute. But in 16, the change really happened for OTT, became mainstream, and we'll show you some charts and data that may or may not be wonderful to the eye, but it gets the point across of how fast this segment, this opportunity, this choice to view people's favorite content has become such a player and a real opportunity for our advertisers and, in this case, our dealers.
Yeah, and I think the OTT changeover is really accelerating nowadays. But let's go ahead, Tim, and I want you to kind of define OTT for everybody. What is OTT? What should they be thinking about when they hear those letters?
Well, think of your digital campaigns, and I'm sure everybody here on this call has, as a dealership, has a lot of digital. You may be all digital. You may have a mix in your media campaign. But what do we love about digital? Well, we're able to have a lot of information about what people do. We can target, we can optimize, we can show attribution. Gino spoke to some of that. But because this television content, this video content, think of your favorite TV show, is being viewed in a manner through the internet, instead of having to go through a traditional set-top box from cable or your satellite provider, we have the ability to capture viewer habits. We have actions that we can measure and correlate. And we'll get into how that works in a bit. But the over the top just means we're bypassing the traditional set-top box that's near your the television screen that Comcast or Cox or Charter or whoever your cable or satellite provider is gave you. So OTT is delivered. How is it's not through the box? How is it delivered? Well, people have devices. So you can obviously log in and watch it on your PC or your tablet or your phone. You can use a gaming console, and you can buy smart TVs from Samsung and others. They're growing at a huge rate. We'll get into a bit about the devices. You can use Apple TVs, Fire Sticks, and so on. And we'll cover more about that. But the cool thing is it now allows people to use their favorite form of viewing to either add services, or if they came up and they never had cable or satellite, they have more services than ever before. And I guess the point I really want to make about this is that most people think of OTT, they think of Amazon Prime and Netflix, which are what we call subscriber supported. It's not an ad environment. You have to pay monthly to be there. Well, viewers can now choose services that are ad supported, and it could be, and I'm just going to name 2 or 3, there's hundreds: CBS All Access, Sling, Pluto. These are free services, Samsung TV, another, that you can watch it supported by advertising. Now, there's another group out there that's starting to emerge, a hybrid, where it's a low subscription monthly, but it's also ad supported. So the consumer has so many ways to expand their ability to absorb this content.
So that makes a lot of sense. And thanks for that breakdown, Tim. So now that we've defined OTT, let's talk about what does it mean to advertise on OTT?
Right. So it's important to distinguish what is OTT content and where the advertiser's TV commercial will be placed. You know, many offerings today from various entities in the advertising world have blurred that line by by mixing online video advertising with OTT advertising. Some will put a lot of online video with a little bit of OTT, or vice versa. And they're being driven to drive a cost per thousand, very attractive, affordable pricing. Nothing wrong with that, but you need to know what you're buying. So when you're looking at online video, we sell it. We think it's wonderful. I like it. It's a great strategy. It's a good venue to advertise. It has different costs. It has different measurements, okay, than OTT. So it's important to distinguish. So when you're looking at OTT, and you're going to put your dealership's message here, it's in a professional, what we call episodic content. So think ESPN, think HGTV, or your favorite news channel, and I won't mention those because they can be lightning in a bottle on politics and things, but whatever you like to watch, let's say it's, for me, Caribbean Life. I love that show on HGTV, something my wife and I watch together. So we would watch that, and it's a full 30-minute episode with commercials. Compare that to pre-roll or mid-roll or post-roll on YouTube with, let's say, funny cat videos. Now, look, before I get in trouble, my wife loves those videos. I see them all. She comes up to me with her phone and shows them to me almost every day. I'm not knocking them. That's a different video experience. It's a different advertising opportunity, different metrics. This is a full episode of your favorite show or movie with advertising in it. So it's a different video consumption by the consumer. Different tactic.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction for everyone to realize. A lot of people out there, a lot of vendors will talk about OTT video in the same breath as pre-roll or skippable video, and they'll come to you with very low CPCs calling it OTT, when in actuality, it's just your ad content on, like Tim said, maybe a cat video or something completely unrelated that the consumer can close or skip immediately without having to watch. What we're advocating as far as true OTT advertising is exactly what Tim said. Putting your ad in the commercial flights within a long-form episodic piece of content that is not skippable, that's highly targeted, but that consumers have to watch when they're watching this content. And I think the important thing too, and Tim's going to talk more about this, is talk about the OTT revolution as it is. I mean, I know there's still a lot of viewers that are out there watching their content on cable, but OTT is certainly, building a place for itself, right, Tim?
Right. It's big. And one thing that I just thought of while you were talking, Gino, that is real important is most of the breaks are a minute and a half. So you think about the television commercial breaks you see on your broadcast stations in the mornings or during the news, very long, and multiple advertisers in them. And after 4 or 5 commercials, you're like, is anybody even paying attention to my commercial anymore? And the cable pods seem to have grown longer as well. These are 90 seconds long. So if you're one of 330s, you have a high opportunity to get seen with your and cut through the clutter. So what's happened is that we've now got 100 million homes in the U.S. that have connected TVs through either smart TVs or devices that we just covered. That's about 75% of the households out there. So some of those, 30 million of those in the U.S. are identified as cord cutters or cord nevers. And, you know, eMarketer has said that they expect that to double within the next 5 years. Now, some of that has changed during the pandemic. We've just seen YouTube go up $15 a month on their OTT. So I saw another service was going to go up today. So they're going to have to keep paying for content. So their pricing is going to get, you know, stronger and higher. But we'll see where it goes. It is now approaching, as you can see in this graph, the non-pay TV homes, or ad-supported OTT, if you will, compared to the pay TV homes, if you will, say satellite and cable, is coming close to parity. If you look at 2023, we're going to be very close together. What does this mean to you as a dealer? This means that you have an opportunity to reach the unreachables. So many of the OEMs I've heard over the last couple of years, when I've been working extensively on this at Spectrum Reach, which is owned by Charter, this was called television extension. Whatever you choose to call it, this is an opportunity to engage highly qualified viewers in a very targeted way and to be deep into the attribution. And what's cool in this last bullet on the right is that 40% of the OTT viewers have paused their content because the commercial that they saw for a product or service was so engaging they wanted to learn more about it. So you may have heard people talk about the second screen. When people are watching a commercial, they do a search for whatever that commercial was talking about. And that gives advertisers like us and dealerships like you the opportunity to really engage a consumer. So we want our commercial, our creative, as we get very narrow and targeted, are very identifying of the intender. They're an intender for a truck, they're an intender for a lease. If they're whatever the targeting is, we want to tweak our message for those households so we're relevant. And we'll get more into that in a minute, but I think this is so cool because we could never know how many people were watching broadcast or just a regular cable commercial and satellite commercial. How many am I engaging? We knew it, but we couldn't measure it. So very excited about this ability. And for our digital heavy dealers, this is the accountability you've been looking for.
Yeah, I think this is an important piece too. And then considering the devices that consumers are using. Tim, talk us through this a little bit, because it's not enough to know that OTT is making this huge surge in the marketplace, but there are a lot of different places where that content can be accessed, right?
Right, and connected TV has continued to grow in part due to the development of devices. So it makes this content easy to access. Smart TVs come equipped with so many apps now that can deliver the content. That's, think of the newer Samsungs and LGs and smart TVs out there. But even if you've got a bit of an older one, Roku, Amazon Fire, these have the gaming consoles, they can help you deliver this content. So as a consumer, there's a lot of ways that you can get this content into your home through a mix of devices. And I'll just give you for instance. In my home, I've got a Samsung Smart TV. In a different room, I've got another TV that's through an Apple TV device, yet another one through another Apple TV device. And then I've got another TV that I can get OTT through a Blu-ray player. So it's a little crazy and the choice that I have, but it's for my convenience. And so that's why you see so many people and households having so many varied ways to consume this.
Yeah, so the OTT, let's call it ecosystem out there, it's getting, I think, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, it's getting a little bit more fragmented every day with new systems that are out there and new ways to buy this ad space and new platforms that are coming out too, right? So
right.
We have to kind of be able to navigate that aspect of it too. So everyone listening on the call, it's really important to keep in mind when you're talking to an OTT vendor and ask them, what platforms they do have access to, what devices can they run their content through, or your content, I should say. That's kind of a really, really big piece to note here, is to just understand that you have a full service agency that you'd be working with to get that content out there. Now, when we look at OTT, the benefits are apparent in terms of the fact that it's reaching more and more consumers who haven't really been accessible through traditional cable, and that those numbers are coming closer together, as we saw earlier. But the other benefit of OTT is that when we think about it in the realm of all other digital advertising, is that unlike cable or broadcast, those more traditional video formats, you have so much more data points that you can use to get hyper targeted with your ad content. So I'm going to cover kind of some bigger ideas here that go along with that. And the first is that we can now, with video content in this format, really be much better at targeting users versus just devices. I think beforehand, basically a TV ad was sent out to a marketplace. You'd have demographics that were a little bit broader, like household income, what channels somebody would watch, things of that nature. But it never told you anything about if a consumer was in the market for a car, what car they currently owned, how long they have left on their lease, if they're geographically located within a certain area or even within a certain structure. Like, for example, if a user is a member of the military and they're at the local base every single day, we can target them with specific military content. We'll show examples of this in a minute. But you can take all of that targeting idea and methodology that we're traditionally used to with regular digital advertising and put it towards this video content in OTT. I think the great part about this to consider is that OTT has a lot of viewership that is much longer than traditional cable. So as you see here, viewers watch OTT content twice as long as standard cable. Everyone's heard of the term binge watching before. That's come about because of OTT. Everything's on demand. So rather than someone in a household having to watch a certain program that they like to watch only between the hours of 7 and 7:30 every Thursday night, now they can watch as much of that content or of that show as they'd like over the course of a couple of hours whenever they have the time to do it. So that's a really big factor in OTT, is that you're getting people in front of the television longer. And this is another big one. OTT really promotes co-viewing. I know a lot of couples out there won't, one person won't watch the show that the two of them are watching without the other. And the reason that's important for automotive is that we know car buying or car purchasing is usually a two-person decision. It's usually a person and their spouse who makes that decision together. So that's another benefit to have your ads on OTT. And like I mentioned before, OTT can connect to all of your other online marketing. So this is a really key point to take in. When you think of OTT, or when you think of video advertising traditionally, it's always been thought of as separate from your Google Ads campaigns or your Bing campaigns or Facebook or any of the other data that you have access to. What's possible these days is connecting all of these systems together so that they all play off of each other. And I mentioned in the beginning how OTT can be a really good complement to your other digital advertising in terms of forcefully pushing people through your sales funnel. This is really how it's done. OTT can get somebody engaged and get somebody excited. You can push your content in front of people. Then these other formats here can actually drive consumers through the rest of the purchase process. So what we're able to do with OTT is tie it into, say, a specific Google Ads campaign, to where when somebody is targeted as an OTT customer via the campaigns that they're searching in Google, or the content that they engage with in Facebook, or even the fact that they exist in your DMS as somebody who leased a car from you almost 3 years ago, who we know their lease is coming due, all of that data gets pumped into the the cross-device ad platform that we see right here can then be funneled into the OTT content, and that piece of the puzzle can now be fit into everything else that we're doing. So essentially, what you can create here is a full scope, start to finish, automotive digital marketing ecosystem that takes video and brings it into the fold with everything else that you're already doing, your social ads, your display ads, your search ads, your remarketing, all in an effort to drive the consumer into your showroom. We can also connect these dots from a reporting standpoint too, and makes attribution a lot more clear, which we'll get to in a little bit. But it's important to understand this connection between how OTT can take your traditional, 30-second TV ads, for lack of a better term, and pull them into your overall digital ecosystem here. And when I talk about getting targeted, you can get really, really targeted. I don't want to hang out here too long because there's a lot of data on here, but this is all the targeting that would come into the fold when you engage with an OTT type of advertising format. Geo-targeting, like I mentioned before, if somebody's a member of the military base, of the military, and they work at the base nearby, you'll know that just by the fact that they're always in that geo-target. If they ever enter that geo-target, you can then put them in a targeting bucket that says, I want to give you an ad about my military service discount. But segment targeting, if somebody's in the market for a large SUV or a luxury SUV or a luxury sedan, all of that gets segmented same way it does with all your other digital advertising. And then first party data is key. What's in your CRM and what's in your DMS that we can use for loyalty campaigns, conquest campaigns. Like maybe you have somebody that we want to target that filled out a lead on your website a couple years ago, but bought a car from somebody else. You can target them to purchase a new vehicle from you this time as a conquest shopper. So you can get extremely granular, and Tim's come up with an excellent, very large, very robust automotive marketing playbook that incorporates all of this. We'd love to talk to you more about at a separate time. But think about the possibilities that you have with taking your ad dollars and really making them go very, very far in very specific campaigns with video, using data like this to make it happen. At that point, you start to get into a targeting methodology that can be categorized as either reaching a one-to-many sort of targeting system where you have one message for a large segment of your marketplace, or one-to-few where you have one message specific to a certain group of people within your marketplace, or really a true one-to-one message to where you have really not dialed in who needs to see which piece of ad content on a one-to-one basis to make the most effective connection between the ad that the customer's seeing and everything that they're interested in today. And I want Tim to kind of walk us through this idea a little bit more. And Tim, you've said this more often than I can remember in recent months, but very, very true. You've got to define your goals first, right?
Right. I feel like a broken record. But, I think the one thing that really separates a lot of dealerships and the success of their marketing is their planning and their definition of their goals and a clear path to those. And I won't belabor the point, but it comes back to this. If you're talking to us or anyone else as your advertising consultant, the more we understand your goal and can identify it, the better we're going to do in targeting. So think of your targeting abilities with traditional digital campaigns. For many on this call, that's what is important to you is, yeah, this is all cool, Gino and Tim, but what's in it for me? How am I going to sell more cars or write more ROs? How am I going to get a better gross profit? Whatever the case may be. But there's some definite key performance indicators that you're going to want to put some numbers and some attribution to. We have broken this down into conquest and loyalty. We usually come up with a strategy that follows one of those two paths, and sometimes it blends. Conquest is what we think of when dealers are wanting to target new customers who haven't bought or haven't searched from their store, and you want to pull them away from the competition. We know direct mail, we know email, we know digital marketing can do that. OTT can do that as well because of the targeting ability. Loyalty is what we usually think a dealer wants to do to keep his customers or her customers from defecting to the competition. Again, we can do that with OTT as well as the digital campaigns. So there's so many personal devices that consumers have logged into. that they use apps on, whether it's Amazon or their Netflix or their weather.com or maps or whatever, you know, they've got on their device that they carry with them. And you probably have one in your pocket right now. When you go back home and you get on your Wi-Fi and you're going through your router, that all becomes a household to device mapped chart. And we can use that to target consumers in numbers of ways. But it's important that you understand that we tie this together, because now it's going to click when we start talking about geo-targeting and how we can change our commercials with small edits to become very relevant to each of them. So in this example, we'll show you a Dodge dealer here in a minute. Go ahead and click through it, Gino, to get the truck over here on the right. But we're building, for example, some larger audiences. So think of it as your July sale, right? So we're going to have a theme of, it's an all-out sellout during the month of July. We won't be blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we can target households that are in market and serve them different creative versions so it becomes relevant to them. So we're building a big audience, but we're going to version our commercials and target those households within that big audience. So as you look, we've got 6 examples we've bucketed up here just for this analogy. And we'll combine some of them may stand alone. For example, we can geo-target customers who visit our competition. Now that can be other Ram dealers, or it can be Ford dealers or Chevy dealers. For those people in market, if we geo-fenced a dealership that's our competition, again, if they've been there, their device tells us where they've been. Now we can retarget them with an OTT ad on the device or on their connected big screen TV when they get home. We can export first-party data. So like Gino said, people in the past that have come into your dealership that didn't convert, we can have a commercial just for them and targeting just for them. Or we can take geo-targeting, segment targeting, garage data, mix it together. We can use make targeting with non-loyalty shoppers. Okay, so people who like trucks, but they're not loyal, and they've been in the truck for 3 years or more. That's a couple of pieces of data here. And again, that's a different audience we're curating. Now we're going to curate a large audience, but there's going to be pieces and parts that we can serve a really relevant message to within. So that's one to many, if you would think of it that way. And then one to few. So we're shifting gears a little bit. In this example, we're going to use a Toyota dealer, and we're narrowing our focus to some specific audiences, and that's why we call it one to few. So let's say the commercial is still about your July sale at your dealership, but for this audience, the commercial's edited to be relevant from a geography standpoint. Let's keep Gino's military example that he talked about earlier. I'm in Nashville, really close to Fort Campbell. And, you know, there's forts all over the country. I'm sure some of you on this call have this aha in the back of your mind, or you can think of a similar segment. But military families need to know that a dealership understands the way they are paid, and they have processes and programs built in to make the buying from that store frictionless, right? That's a big word right now. We're all talking about making it frictionless. But if they understand you get it, they're going to be really comfortable coming to you. So in this case, we can target households that are in this geography, okay? So we are now addressable level commercials to the homes, geo-addressable, and we understand where they are. We know these homes, and we can combine those tactics. So if they're in market for, let's say, a non-luxury sedan, we're trying to push, in this case with Toyotas, Corollas and Camrys, hypothetically. But we are looking for people who are predisposed to buying Toyota. Maybe they've got one in the garage. It's 3 years or older, and they didn't buy it from us. So we can start building multiple audiences here that are intenders, but not just intenders for what meets your needs. If you've got a big inventory of Camrys that you need to roll because they're over 90 days in a floor plan, tell us. That makes a difference. We can get very specific very quickly. And again, we struck out 3 years ago in your BDC with someone who bought a Camry somewhere else, but we've got their data. We can remarket to that. So your imagination is, in this point, ask. us as the advertiser, not us, but the advertising world, when you come to OTT, what's the art of possible? What can we do? So when we get to one to few, this is going to be a BMW commercial or an advertising opportunity. But if you will, this comes down to one-to-one. Let's keep the same idea of a July sale, just because I want you guys to understand it doesn't have to be a completely 180-degree different commercial. It can be just fine edits that make it relevant for the advertising consumer, the viewer. So let's say a dealer wants to target customers for luxury with mid-size SUVs, and they're exhibiting shopping behavior. So we can do that. We can look for those people in market. We can also geo-target them. So if we know of a very high-end set of zip codes, or we have looked in data from Experian or Polk or Urban Science or whoever, and we know where there's a clustering of those, we can target that from a geo-targeting standpoint, or we can geo-target our competitive dealers. In this case, maybe it's a Mercedes guy that we want to try to conquest his mid-size SUV away to the BMW competitive segment. So we can narrow that down very tightly and conquest that. And again, we can pull from your CRM and look at people you missed out on earlier. But here's another idea. It's not on this slide. What if you gave us a list of all the leases you had in your DMS that were going to come up in the next 3 months, hypothetically? I can deliver a commercial just to them. That may still be the July sale, but you may want to give me a special loyalty offer that I can make as an edit, and it's the same commercial, which is the edit that goes to those folks. Come back to Timbo's BMW and get a special blah, blah, blah. So again, why would they stop and find out more? Because that commercial is relevant to them. And that's the secret of the OTT audience.
Yeah.
And then, I was just going to say, and Gino, you're going to talk to us a bit about what Amazon is doing to charge into the automotive space. And we're excited. As you can tell, we're data hounds, and these guys have some serious chops when it comes to data, and the things they're doing are really exciting. So I was just going to pass this over to Gino.
Yeah, no, thanks. And you're right. It's if you do like digging into the data and what's truly possible in terms of ad targeting, there's really nobody doing it better than Amazon. And they're doing it better for some very specific reasons that we're going to cover. But first, I want everyone to kind of think about Amazon and where they sit in the big picture scheme of things when you think of the major digital advertising networks. So when I think about that, I think of like Google, I think of Facebook. We're now starting to think of Amazon. But it's important to kind of understand that each entity has its different specializations in terms of what data they have. So Google always knows what you're searching for. They've got that data in the bag, no question about it. Facebook, if you think about your Facebook ads, Facebook knows what you like. What's kind of funny is that this GIF here is from the show Top Gear. For those of you that are familiar, it used to be on the BBC until they parted ways with the BBC, and now Amazon owns the show Top Gear. You can watch it on Amazon Prime. So they've been kind of getting into the automotive video space for a while, I guess you could say. But Facebook knows what you like, what your favorite things are, what you're interested in. The important thing about Amazon from a marketing standpoint when it comes to data, and I think this is the biggest data point if we're trying to sell more cars, Amazon knows what you spend your money on. So we can take all of that interesting data from Facebook, show what you like, from Google, show what you search for. But if Amazon tells me what you spend your money on, I'm going to have a pretty good idea if you're going to buy what I'm selling you. So when it comes to automotive, Amazon has some huge data sets specific to the cars people have and the cars people shop for. So Amazon, as a platform, has over 250 million unique visitors a month. And all of these visitors, this is a very important thing to consider, and I'm going to repeat this as we go through. All of these visitors are logged into their Amazon account on every single device that they own at every single hour of the day. I'm on my laptop right now. It's logged into Amazon. I've got my phone right next to me with the Amazon app on it. It's logged in. So if I do something on my laptop, and that doesn't even have to be on Amazon, The fact that I'm logged in here and then I go to my phone and do the same content, Amazon logins connect the two devices, so you can have a true cross-device targeting and tracking platform that really no other network has to this degree, that allows us to know who I am regardless of what device I'm accessing your content on. So that's a very, very important thing. The other important thing about Amazon's Amazon's data is that it's all user generated. So user generated data is always the best because it's always accurate. And Amazon user data is always going to be accurate because it has to be. If a user is going to buy something from Amazon, they got to put their right credit card information in. If they're going to get that item shipped to them, they have to put the right shipping address in. You have to differentiate if your shipping address is different from your billing address. All of these data points that we'd like to use for a targeting standpoint, other platforms have to sometimes guess at, because I've never given Google my actual address. They can guess at it pretty well, but it's still just a guess. But I can tell you, I have put every single home I've ever lived in into Amazon because they've shipped me products to those locations. In terms of research for vehicles, Amazon kind of sneakily has really moved up the ranks in terms of an automotive research platform that we'll get to as well. But that shows clear intent from a shopper standpoint. If I'm on Amazon and I'm looking at new Jeep Wranglers, that's a very clear-cut indication that I'm probably in the market for a new car. Now I have that data point to trigger that customer who is in, a good target for an ad. So that's kind of everything I just talked to right here. We're supposed to be on this slide, but that's okay. I can't stress enough the importance of that cross-device data, though. Everybody out there is kind of talking about, we know what everyone's doing everywhere they go. Amazon truly does, because you're logged in everywhere. And there's no reason to log out, really, either, unless you're just trying to protect your data, which is fair. But for the most part, most users are always logged into Amazon everywhere they go. Now, we can't talk about Amazon in automotive unless we talk about Amazon Vehicles. Amazon Vehicles is a portal within Amazon that is traditionally not really been overly hyped by them. But even without being overly hyped, it's a part of their portal that gets hundreds of millions of views every single month. You have in Amazon Vehicles a database of every vehicle going back even to the late 1800s, when the first vehicles were even built, explaining the details of all the cars, every truck that was ever made, every SUV. All of the data you want about any vehicle up to the current 2020 or 2021 models is in Amazon Vehicles. If a user goes into Amazon Vehicles and is looking for car information, that is a huge buying sign and a huge signal that we use in our targeting on Amazon. The other piece of targeting we use on Amazon is also extremely powerful. It comes from the Amazon My Garage section. Now, this was a previous car I owned. I had to buy brakes for it. So Amazon, being the largest online retailer of automotive parts, was to me a perfectly good place to go to buy the parts that I needed. So if I'm going to go on Amazon and sift through the millions of automotive parts that are on the system, the best way for me to do that is to start by typing in my VIN number so Amazon knows which parts are relevant to me. And that's exactly what I did here. So now that Amazon, who knows where I live and the VIN number of my car, now you know how old my car is. You can put an estimate towards how many miles it has. You know what parts I bought for it. Maybe it's, maybe I bought those parts a while ago and now I need service on them. Or maybe my car is old and you want to sell me a new one. And you know that maybe I'm in a certain spend category on Amazon, so I can afford XYZ payment. All of that data mixed together alongside all the other data that gets piped into Amazon is what makes Amazon now and in the very near future the most powerful OTT platform you can use to help you target very specific shoppers by very specific criteria to meet your very specific goals that Tim was just talking about, without having to spend tens of thousands of dollars to do it. I mean, Amazon can be very, very efficient because the data is there that allows us to do all of that. So backing up, if we think of all aspects of OTT we've covered, just to kind of summarize before we move on here, OTT, it's extremely important for you to consider moving forward as part of your overall digital advertising strategy. There are ways to connect your current digital marketing efforts on Google, Facebook, or wherever else to your OTT systems to make them all play into each other and be more effective as a whole. And with data that we have access to, either through this Amazon data we just looked at or other data sources out there, you get away from the old mentality of draw a big, target around your dealership, maybe a 30-mile radius, and show your TV ads to people who are 18 to 55 and, watch these 20 channels or whatever. I mean, you get very, very dialed in to how specifically you can target users, and that always makes for better ad performance. And the great thing about OTT being a digital ad platform is that you don't have to take anybody's word for it. The data will be there to tell you whether or not what your OTT campaigns are doing from a performance standpoint is actually working for you. And then from that data, you can optimize. So Tim, tell us a little bit about some optimization tactics for OTT that dealers can kind of get excited about.
Well, the digital dealer will get this because he understands that he optimizes you or people like us in the DEP world and the other digital marketers optimize campaigns on time. The old television model was we ran toward reach and frequency. We did that in radio and it was based on rating points and such as that. Today, we're not buying points. We're buying an audience. So we want to follow the audience everywhere. So we may have all these targeting opportunities and combinations that we showed you. And we may have a one-to-many strategy with several 100,000 impressions in it with 5 or 6 different strategies. But if we see 1 or 2 emerging as being more engaged and getting more success and driving more actions that we wanted, then we'll optimize to it and pull from other campaigns. So you're buying an audience. You're not buying points. It's not even really about the impression, except that's an expression of a metric. So as you look at it, you need to remember that they're going to change, and they're going to change in month. 2020, what a crappy year, right? But it's a great example of what's happened. Research for consumers goes through a different cycle. They're impacted by different things. They can leave the market because they make a purchase, or they can lose a job or be furloughed and drop out of the market. So they can quit shopping. They can change their mind about segments, models, makes, and offers because of the same factors. Worldviews can change, whether it be politics and crises, natural disasters, economic news, personal events, a kid. So many things can drive a change from moment to moment and day to day. Optimization, just like it does in digital with OTT, is important. And so one thing to take away, we're going to touch on this in the moments that are remaining toward the end, about what the pandemic's done to create more viewership. That's created more inventory. Okay, so more viewership, more opportunities to advertise. The increase in viewership of things like the news, whether it be the protests and the riots or whatever the case may be about the pandemic, that's also created more inventory. So driving people to engage with the content creates more opportunities to target them. So we're going to show you different variables on the next slide. I'm not going to read this, but just needless to say, we've got lots of ways to slice this up, and it becomes one more point in the attribution model that you know so well from the digital world, that we can add another checkpoint in there where OTTs was part of the story. So as we look at this, remember we talked about converting geo-tracking on our competitors. Well, we can also track our dealerships and see how many of people that we targeted that household with those devices walked into your store. Of course, we can talk about impressions and how many times we reached those folks, and what percentage of the audience did we reach? Did they take an action? Did they go to our website and we can measure lift? When they got there, did they text? Did they chat? Did they fill out a form? Did they, have a VDP? Whatever the case may be, we know how to do that once we get them to the website. And we also can source that to see if OTT drove an effective viewer. Now, we want to look at a cost per thousand of impressions. So cost per thousand of auto intenders. What was an effective number? Another way we can talk about campaign reporting is on the following slide. Again, you'll be able to see this after this, I believe. I'm not going to read this. Let's just say that we can slice this thing up 6 ways from Sunday. We want to talk a bit about store visit reporting, because I think this is the end of the pipe for many of us. And because we can use geofencing, it's important to touch this again. When you're going to an advertising consultant, whoever that may be, one of the things that we work on is, what does the household and device graph look like? Do we have the ability to tie offline addresses to IPs, to GPS, back to devices and app usage? How does that map back to the Wi-Fi and the router in the home so that this targeting is possible? So not all entities have this robust what we call household device graph. So that's something important to ask your vendor or your advertising consultant. It gives us the ability to do those addressable commercials to the end market consumer, especially if they visited other dealerships, or we want to identify that they visited you. Of course, we can place the pixel on the dealer on your website to understand how that traffic was impacted. But we also know that OTT, and like all forms of advertising, it's not necessarily just those 2 or 3 points of traffic to the dealership or visits to the website. We could create a phone call. How would we know that came from OTT? Again, it's an indirect. We'd have to look at lift. If we're the one thing you did different, then that could be attributable to more phone calls. But it gives us more insights into the attribution process, so dealers can know, like from their digital campaigns, how are all these tactics working together? What's the right recipe for me? And that right recipe is different for every dealer in every market, because you all are facing such different circumstances. So, you know, what's a great chili in Nashville is not a great chili in Miami or LA or New York. But it's the same with dealerships and their advertising mix.
So with all of that in mind, we've got to be able to put this all together and try to find out what is selling new cars, because nothing is more frustrating to me than looking at a digital marketing campaign. I don't care what network it is, but looking at that type of campaign and having no understanding of how it's impacting sales. To me, that's the most kind of blinded way to go about optimizing a campaign. So what you're going to want to look for is, where does OTT sit in the grand scheme of things? And I've got an example here I just want to show you in terms of how we like to look at things linearly, in terms of where the consumer was driven to action, what networks they were influenced by, and did any of that lead to a sale. So this was actually just a fun example I found, kind of showing that connectivity between all the other digital advertising we're doing for this dealership and their OTT campaigns combined to help drive a sale. So if we look what happened first, on April 13th, this customer went to Google and typed in Kia deal, which triggered an ad from our Google Ads campaign. They clicked on it, went to the site, and looked around, but they didn't take any action after that. But what's interesting is that the fact that they clicked on the ad from our site, ad from our Google campaign, went to the site, we've now tagged them in our OTT campaigns as somebody who's engaged with this specific keyword. So now they're in a OTT remarketing sort of a funnel. Because of that, 7 days later, when they went to watch whatever they were watching on their Amazon Fire Stick, our OTT campaign triggered for them. So we knew a week ago they went to the dealer's site from a Google paid search campaign. They went to then watch their content on their Amazon device, and the OTT ad triggered. The OTT ad also must have triggered them to go to Google and type in that dealership's name, who we were advertising for, because they typed in the dealer's name and found their Google My Business page that same exact day, probably at that moment, clicked that link and went to the dealer's site. Now, I know they typed the dealer's name into Google because that's the only way you're going to see the Google My Business page there. So they, again, were driven back to the site because they were targeted by the OTT ad, that we knew that they were already interested in our dealership's offerings from a week prior, because of that Google ad click. And then last but not least, they did go to Facebook, and we were retargeting them on that platform too. So they engaged with one of our Facebook ads and looked at the dealer's reviews or whatever they did on Facebook just to kind of get that social aspect in there. But Facebook was the last touch point, and that customer eventually did purchase a vehicle. I cannot speak for the gross. Don't talk to me about that because that wasn't me selling the car. But I do know that the advertising that we did had that step-by-step process of walking the customer down the funnel into the showroom to a purchase. And this is what we want to see from an optimization standpoint, because now I can take all of these instances with every different customer that we've engaged with, back it out into what's working and what isn't, and then optimize from there. So, excuse me, when I talk about OTT being a very strong digital system, this is what I'm talking about. It has so much more value ingrained and integrated with your other marketing and your website than it does as a standalone advertising feature. Standalone, it'll still do fine, but when you bring it into the fold with everything else here, that's when you supercharge the results. And so this is kind of the culmination of everything we wanted to talk about. I do want to turn it over to back to Tim for just one more piece, because there are some things you do have to be aware of or have to be cautious of when going into the OTT space. And the first is, again, something Tim brought up that I think is a very, very good point, and that's ad fraud. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about this, Tim?
Yeah, and this is just an article I pasted the headlines from, but I think it's important to know that this has been addressed by the industry, and 19 saw a reduction in the financial losses to ad fraud. So it's hitting a slowdown, which is awesome, because if you look at these numbers, we only lost 5.8 billion globally. The year before we lost 6.5 billion in 17. So it's good to see the ad industry coming together to stomp out fraud. So as you're looking, whether it's us or someone else, to execute an OTT campaign, you want to look for some of these key factors across the bottom as people that are giving you that safe environment. And you want to know that they're involved with the right standards, and your ads on OTT are not getting burned up by fraudsters. So it's important to buy that inventory. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, quickly, I want to make sure that everyone understands how are advertisers being defrauded? Like what is the mechanism that's at work there?
Well, there's server farms that would be imitating a viewership. So just the same way it happens in the digital campaigns that we've worried about bots and things like that over the years. So it's, again, they're logged into a ad-supported OTT offering and imitating a viewer.
Got it. So basically, you could get a report saying you had 250,000 impressions, yet 50,000 of those, unbeknownst to you, were bots and just wasted.
Look, I came from Spectrum, so I'm just going to go back there. We were tag certified. So we knew we were putting you in a safe environment that was certified. We were living up to all the Interactive Bureau's advertising standards. And that's what you want to look for. In any inventory situation where an advertising agency, consultancy, someone like us is placing an OTT campaign, what are you doing about fraud? Tell me where I'm going to be put so that I know I'm not getting my budget wasted. Good question. I just want, not whether it's us or anybody else, just want you to ask that as a dealer. I want you to be aware.
Yeah, well, we don't want anybody to get ripped off, so this is a very important thing to know. And then we can't talk about anything these days without talking about COVID. So tell us, Tim, how COVID's been influencing OTT.
So it's a wild ride. I have to tell no one on this phone that it's a wild ride, and it's not over yet. So it's hard to believe we're at the 6-month point. I'm ready for the year to go. But I know I'm not alone. But some things have happened. Like while dealers have made a jump to embrace digital and virtual retailing, I think Brian told me that it's gone, or I read this somewhere, from 5% before COVID to like 35% of 40% of dealers are bolting on virtual retailing. OTT viewership has accelerated as well, and it's not going back down. So if you look at the week by week across the bottom, it ramped up heavily and stayed there. So even though we have an economy opening back up and some of these, states never really closed, others locked down hard. But this is a graph across the country that shows that people have maintained their viewership of OTT. In the next slide, I want to break it out a little bit for you because people think, well, I'm binge watching, or those people are binge watching Prime, Amazon Prime or Netflix. Yeah, some of that non-ad supported subscriber base, absolutely, took a 5% increase. But here's the cool part. The part you can advertise in grew 9%. It grew twice as fast. So I think that's where the people find value in ad-supported OTT. You can be there, and it grew, just like you grew when you added the ability to be a digital retailer. So as COVID has caused us all to change, viewership has too, and it presents a great opportunity. And I hope that this has been insightful and make you ask more questions of your advertising consultants that you work with. And of course, we're happy to talk to you as well. I'll throw it back to Gino now.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody who listened. I want to thank you, Tim, for all your insight here. Your knowledge of the industry has really, I've learned a lot from working with you. So far, I'm looking forward to continuing to work on this with you and the dealers that we have coming on with us. That this is such a huge thing moving forward. It just can't be ignored. And then lastly, I want to thank Brian for making sure that this conference still happened. It's, again, unfortunate we're not in Napa, but hopefully we'll see you all there next year. So thank you again for your time. Again, if you want to talk about this in any greater detail with either myself or Tim or both of us, here's our contact info. I'm sure we'll be sending out this slide deck as well.